Welcome again to the 13th Annual Texas Energy Summit, sponsored by the Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Ernie LaFleur, co-chairman of the conference, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Energy Committee. As you all know, energy is critical to our society. Energy that is abundant, affordable, and clean is a critical foundation to our community and our standard of living. Over the past 13 years, we've been committed to strive to bring a mix of timely energy topics that are both of local interest in Texas, and also for the energy ecosystem at large that we participate in. But we tried to take it a little bit different way than some conferences, in that we try to do this in a short, pithy conference over an extended lunch hour, so that many people that otherwise would not be exposed can participate in the event and get real world-class information available to them that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get from the media. This year, we think you'll see on your tables there are little stand-up agendas that will show you the speakers that we have, and we'll do detailed introductions for each of those speakers as each speaker comes forward. Accomplishing this kind of conference and putting it together and getting the kind of high-quality speakers that we do takes a good deal of work from a group of volunteers on the Energy Committee that I would like to recognize now. When I call your name, please wave or stand, and please hold your applause and recognition until the end. We have Gates Brailsford, who is co-chairman, Brent Jasper, Ben Morgan, Tom Trimble, Roy Maynard, Hunter Carr, Brad Stinson, Scott Baker, and of course Henry Bell with the Chamber that does so much to make these events successful. Let's please give them a round of applause. Great job, everyone, and now Claude will join us here. I didn't mention his name. He's also on the committee and helping MC this event, and he will now introduce our important sponsors.
Thank you, Ernie. It's great to see everyone here. I love having a packed room, and sure you're enjoying the food and the hospitality of this great facility right here. And it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you here today. I'm Claude Figueroa, and I'm the chairman of the Energy Committee for the Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to serve under that capacity, and it's an easy job because you have great guys like Ernie just introduced to put this event together. They work so hard to make it successful, and it is one of the highlights of the Chamber's events every year. And so, again, I welcome you here. One of the things that I'd like to draw your attention to, once again, is the table tents showing our sponsors. Of course, without our sponsors, it's not possible to make this happen. We appreciate their generosity. And if you would please, a round of applause for our sponsors. The one that pays my bills is my employer, CenterPoint Energy, and I would be remiss if I did not give them credit for giving me the time to spend working for my community and yours, and just striving to do what we can to make Tyler, Smith County, and East Texas a better place to live. So thank you to my employer. And at this time, I'd also like to point to my right is where the facilities are, in case you need that, and also over here to my left. Additionally, if you have a cell phone that has an interesting ring, you don't want to be known as that person that had to get their phone out in panic while it rings. If you would be so kind and silence your phone, that would be greatly appreciated. And another announcement, the summit is going to be available today, or probably a little after today, for viewing on the Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel. So if you'd like to come back and look at the speakers or even previous summits, you can do so on our YouTube channel under the Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce some of our elected officials that have joined us today. And starting at the top, if you would please, when I read your name, if you would please rise or wave. The 12th Court of Appeals, Chief Justice James Worthen. Judge, where are you? Right over there. Yes. And from U.S. Senator John Cornyn's office, we have Mr. Reese DeWoody. And from U.S. Congressman Nathaniel Moran's office, we have Chelsea Cohen. Senator Brian Hughes, did he make it? All right, maybe he's on his way. State Senator Robert Nichols. State Representative Cody Harris. State Representative Cole Hefner is also here with us today. And from the City of Tyler, gracing us with their presence, we have City of Tyler Mayor Don Warren, Councilman Lloyd Nichols, Councilman James Wynn, and Councilman Brad Curtis, and Councilman Stuart Haney. Here from the City of White House, we have City Councilman Michael Lowe. From the Smith County, we have Smith County Judge Neil Franklin. Commissioner John Moore. And Commissioner Terry Phillips. We also have the pleasure of having with us County Court at Law 2 Judge Sarah Maynard. And also Tyler Junior College Board of Trustees, Lonnie Uzel. We appreciate all our elected officials. We appreciate everything that you do. And we certainly appreciate your efforts and continuing to improve the quality of life for our community. Thank you again. Applause for all of them, please. And now it is time for me to announce, or introduce rather, Ben Morgan. Ben Morgan is a partner with Lockton, and Lockton is one of the presenting sponsor rather, and a good friend of this committee, a good friend of this chamber, a good citizen of this community, Ben Morgan.
Well, Claude just gave me a lot to live up to there. There was a lot of goods in that, I heard. So, appreciate everybody coming out for the 13th annual. I think this thing's going to stick finally. We've thought about it for years, but we're on number 13, so I think we've got a good thing going here. So this is the 13th annual Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce Energy Summit, so I appreciate everybody coming out. And do want to make one correction. Chelsea from Nathaniel Moran's office could not make it, so we do have Jalen Lewis, Senior Advisor. He was able to make it over today. So Jalen, we appreciate you making it today. Thank you. Well, it's always my pleasure when I get to introduce one of my good friends up here on stage, and not only a good friend, but a fellow East Texan who has spent his entire life here in East Texas and representing East Texas. So, Wayne Christian is a lifelong conservative businessman who was reelected for a second term as our 50th Texas Railroad Commissioner in 2022. And throughout his time in office, Commissioner Christian has developed a strong record of fighting against frivolous regulations and standing strong for free markets and a strong American energy dominance. Commissioner Christian was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission as the official representative of the state of Texas. Through this role, Wayne has been a national leader on the forefront of fighting against the Biden administration on efforts like the Green New Deal that he's been pushing back against. Wayne is an East Texas native and a graduate of Stephen F. Austin University, much like I'm sure we've got a few of those in here as well. After college, Wayne found success in the music industry with his country gospel band, the Mercy River Boys, and went to be a finalist for a Grammy Award in 1979. I don't think we have too many other Grammy Award finalists in here. Wayne opened his financial service business, and he's a three-time AIG top advisor nationwide. Prior to his time as commission, Christian served 7 sessions in the Texas House of Representatives as the first Republican in Deep East Texas since Reconstruction after the Civil War. He was the leader for the conservative renaissance of our state and successfully assisted in the fight to elect a Republican majority in the Texas legislature. Would y'all please help me welcome for our fellow East Texan, Wayne Christian.
Okay, now I got to look at the clock because Ben told me to sit down, shut up. Now he doesn't have a lot of respect for his elders, but I've been told me and Louis Gohmert earned that right by saying too much too long. Honored to be with you again. Oil and gas is doing great in Texas, great in the world. Things are going great. United States is #1 in production in the world right now. Texas right now is around about 40 to 50% of the USA's production. It's of oil and about 35% of natural gas of USA production. If we were a nation, we'd be like number, I think, 10 in the world in oil and gas production right now from the state of Texas. In fact, because we have that stance between Louisiana and Texas in liquefied natural gas exports, we are called by the Wall Street Journal the hope of the free world. It's a time that things look good and happy. We're eating steak, drinking iced tea, smiling and grinning. But let me tell you something, folks. We are losing a war. And the war is set against us that by the Green New Deal, by the Inflation Reduction Act, and right now, we as an industry, now let me get real clear. I'm not talking to the folks in this room. This is the choir I'm speaking to. And if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me. But as being elected by 30 million plus Texans to represent oil, gas, and coal, I feel it a responsibility to look at the picture of what's going on. We just had a meeting about a month ago at the Railroad Commission where all the greenies showed up and talked about how terrible we at the Railroad Commission were and all the problems we were causing by not going along with the EPA's new methane rule. You understand that methane rule, those in this room do understand, that the largest 80% of the production of oil in the United States comes from independents, not the big 7 internationals. Independents, that's the folks in this room. And you produce, by the way, 91% of all discovery of new oil and development of new oil and gas. 91%. And right now there is a war on you. If Joe Biden's EPA gets this methane rule down, over 10,000 marginal wells will close. 1/3 of the production of the state of Texas will go away. And they're headed that direction. And what concerns me is such good friends of ours as Occidental and BP were on the side with the greenies supporting that. And I immediately think, okay, I go into their net and these big boys want to shut down and lower their carbon footprint. I'm a railroad commissioner. I want to commit to them. I'm on their side. If they want to shut down their carbon footprint in the state of Texas, I want to help them every darn way I can, okay? It's time we stood up and fought. This is a lie that we have allowed to build on the ground. We call ourselves God's people in this country, and I think for the largest part we are. But folks, he gave us a gift of oil, gas, and coal. And he gave us that in the ground. It's natural. And we have become, in developing that resource, the largest producer in the world, and we also are the cleanest in the world. The last 100 years, environmental deaths have gone down 98%. The last 50 years, all the big chemicals that the EPA has that are terrible and horrible, well, with population doubling, use of machinery tripling, yet we in the United States have decreased the use of those chemicals that they talk about, the airborne chemicals, by over 75% at the same time. In other words, instead of the greenies griping and groaning and yelling at the oil and gas industry, we should be getting awards from them. In fact, the United States, this is kind of funny, the greenies were sitting there griping at us at the Railroad Commission for all the pollution that you guys were doing in the state. And I just stopped and thought, and I said, well, the last 5 years alone, the Railroad Commission of Texas has won 7 international, state, university awards for our environmental cleanup projects. In fact, we won an award last year from the Joe Biden's Department of Interior for the #1 environmental cleanup in the nation, and it happened 200 yards from my office in Center, Texas. So I just want to turn to the greenies and say, how many awards have y'all won from Joe Biden's for the environmental cleanup? Our industry, our organizations, our associations, we have. We've done more in the oil and gas industry to clean up the environment in the last 100 years than all the green groups put together. Think of that. Do you hear that on the news? Do you hear that anywhere? And I'm saying, folks, it's time we stood up and we fought. I'm tired of saying, well, this green stuff's okay. Well, we've lost that battle. You know, there's stuff in all types of historical reforms and reformations and all types of things, and especially in the Bible, where it says if you build your house upon sand, it's going to fall. If we build under this hoax, now I've lived long enough, I know I'm gray-haired and I'm old and I'm decrepit and I'm a right-wing and I'm a conservative, I'm a flat earther, all those things, and darn proud of it. But let me tell you, when you look back at history and you see that we're sitting here looking at what we've been given, and that we're seeing that one time they started, in the early 70s, they were talking about the Great Ice Age, the next Ice Age, Time Magazine, the Ice Age. Then it went to global warming. Then it went to climate change, since neither of those two really happened. And then they started doing we had an ozone layer problem. We had all these kind of problems. Some little gal that could barely talk from England or somewhere came over here and started talking, like Time Magazine Person of the Year, Greta Thunberg, that we're all going to die in 10 years. Well, that was 12 years ago. You got Al Gore said he was going to all be dead or the oceans flooded. You had Barack Obama that in 2018 got up and said that all the coasts were going to be covered around the United States by water within the next 5 to 6 years. And a few years later, he bought at Martha's Vineyard a sea-level mansion. So either the realtor lied to him or he lied to us, one of the two. And so now they got on flaring. I remember I was with a big group out of Austin, a company, and they had their man from Wall Street there. And the man from Wall Street said, Commissioner, they have this new thing called ESG that Larry Fink and Al Gore are in New York showing pictures of the flaring out in the Permian Basin 2018 when we had just discovered that field, and it was just flaring going on. And so I came back and I told the commissioner, okay, we need to fight this, that the perception is bad. The stats weren't bad. We were doing 2.9% of all gas at that time being produced was being flared. Went during COVID a couple of years later down to 1.9. Currently, flaring in the state of Texas, folks, of all the natural gas being produced is less than 1%. Tell me any industry, any place, anywhere where you have a problem of less than 1% that requires shutting down oil and gas and 80% of the world's energy. Think about it. But we're living that way. And our big companies are advertising it, the big internationals. They get up I was with Ted Cruz down in the Petroleum Club in Houston just a few months ago. And I got up and did my rant and rave like I'm doing right now, my old man flat earther routine. And Ted gets up and got him kind of wired up a little bit. And he got up, and there were a lot of the oil and gas companies there. And he said, you know, he's right. He said, you guys sit out here and put windmills and solar panels and algae all over your quarterly statements and your prospectus. And then you do what the Democrats want to, then you come up to Washington and expect us to bail you out from their policies they try to do. So we're sitting here now, we're playing this carbon game. Let me tell you about carbon. Now, I'm not a scientist, right? Carbon is this is on Al Gore's Google, okay? You Google this on the internet. You say, how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere? It's 0.002%. Then you can ask a second question on the internet. How much of that is man-made? Comes out to 0.0004. We're in the millionths of a percent of carbon dioxide. Okay? Then you go to methane. All right, that's the latest thing that's going to kill us all. We've got these, Google now has a satellite going out with Amazon, and they're doing every pipeline in the world and measuring methane, right? Methane is 0.0004%. in the millionths and billionths of a percent of the atmosphere. Now, I'm from East Texas, Stephen F. Austin, public school, not brilliant in any regard, not educated to a large extent. But when you're talking about millions and billions of the atmosphere, if man was totally taken off the planet, that's like a grasshopper farting in a hurricane. Am I right? All right. But we're all presuming this. We all want a lower carbon future. It's not a problem in Texas, attacking 40% of our entire economy. Understand, it's all the rainy day fund, all the permanent school fund, all the higher education fund. A large part of the excess money we have right now to be Texas is God's gift of oil, gas, and coal to this state. What have we done since Uri? As Texans, the legislature has passed a great bill addressing ESG, but folks, you can't fight this thing once every 2 or every 4 years and think it's done. In fact, BlackRock was back in my office, the one that kind of led this charge of ESG, that we've outlawed them. The legislature in their wisdom said these, and Ken Paxton, Glenn Hager identified, and BlackRock was one of the main companies that was doing the ESG stuff and shutting down 90% of the finance into oil and gas. Had their head guy in my office, their head finance guy was in my office this past week. And he said, well, I was here 2 years ago and you weren't very happy with us for the ESG. But we've seen the light of the way and we're here, we've fixed everything. And we as BlackRock are your friends and good guys. In fact, if you just get all your independents together, they're needing financing, I know. Well, we'll just come and provide the financing. And I looked at him, I said, okay, you spent 6 years shutting down every bank and finance company we possibly could have in Texas. And then you walk back in saying you're going to do a gift of God and come back and just provide it for us. Isn't that called market manipulation? And folks, that's what's going on. The big guys are driving this train. Their goal is to shut down oil and gas. Now, let me just real quickly, I got 3 minutes. Oil and gas, you shut down oil and gas. Here's the logic on this stuff. You shut down oil and gas, 3 things. Oil and gas, when the price of oil goes up, it's not just gasoline. Oil and gas are 91% of consumer products. 91%, including this item called medicine. If you shut down medicine, what does it do? Kill billions of people. Number 2, food. Fertilized food can feed 12.7 billion people on the planet. Organic food, 4 billion. Math problem. 8 billion folks living. 4 billion gonna starve. Number 3, world energy, 80% right now is oil, gas, and coal. Wind and solar are 5%. They're going to replace oil, gas, and coal with wind and solar. Problem is, you can't build wind and solar or batteries without oil. So what you're going to do is remove 80% of energy in the world, probably nearly 95%. Billions of people will die. This is illogical, immoral, irrelevant, and totally against the will of God. And I'm to do the prayer. My name's Christian, so they asked me to do the prayer, right? Here's what I would address of God. God's looked at this several times, and we as God's people, this is prayer time, okay? King Solomon built the great temple, finally. David couldn't do it. God had Solomon do it. And he went and married a bunch of women from all over the world that had different religions, got out of favor with God. And God said, I'm going to scatter your people across the world. He did that. But he gave Solomon a promise. Remember that? One promise. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, heal the land. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm ready for a land healing. Big time. Will you join me in prayer? Father, we come to you this morning just praising you for the gifts that you've given us. We are beyond a doubt the richest people on planet Earth. You've given us riches and wealth that no people have ever known. And Father, we take that for granted too much. We come to you humbling ourselves, asking forgiveness for having taken for granted. Father, we're not stepping up for you, working, fighting, and using the tools you've given us in this country of freedom that you provided. So Father, we come to you today humbling ourselves, thanking you for the grace, for the fortune, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our families, asking your protection on these elected officials here, these senators and representatives and others in all areas of our government and judicial system, Father, that they might have the boldness, the strength, and the cover and the protection of God. in what they do, that they may stand boldly against the wave of current political climate and stand for what they know is true, what they know is right. And Father, give us that same as citizens to go and vote and work and participate and support, make our ways known, and may our ways be your ways. Father, we thank you for the meeting, for the food, for the fellowship, and ask that you be here, that when we leave, it not just be a time of talk and fellowship, but a time that we come together and decide it's time we stood up for you, your kingdom, and for the blessings you've given us in oil, gas, coals, and other minerals, and all the blessings this land has provided for us as Americans. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gage Brailsford, and I have the great pleasure today to introduce a fine gentleman who's with one of the finest companies, not only in Tyler, but in Northeast Texas and in Texas. I've been around these guys for about 20 years. I know them well. They're an unbelievable company. So we're really very, very happy to have them here today. For a quick introduction, Kenneth Waits received his BS in Petroleum Engineering from the University of Oklahoma in 1983 and pursued graduate business studies at UT Tyler. After graduating from OU, he joined Mewburn as an operations engineer in Oklahoma and has spent his entire career with the company. Amazing. Never happens much. He served Mewburn in numerous roles, and he is currently the president and CEO of Mewburn Oil Company. Ken serves on the boards of American Exploration and Production Council, the Permian Basin Strategic Partnership, the Permian Basin Petroleum Association, and is former chairman of the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. He's an oil guy. He has chaired and served in numerous civic and charitable organizations in Tyler, Salvation Army Mentoring Alliance, All Saints Episcopal Church, and the Texas Rose Festival Association. Ken has a passion for education and a passion for OU. He served as chairman of the Industry Advisory Board for the Mewburn College of Earth and Energy and School of Petroleum and Geological Engineering at OU, among other roles. As a note, Mewburn has consistently been one of the largest providers of scholarships, internships, and full-time jobs at the University of Oklahoma, as well as Texas Tech. Ken and his wife, Laura, live in Tyler. They are proud parents of Hannah Waits. Hannah is a 1922 graduate of OU. Thank you, Ken. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you, Gage.
So this is going to be a little different today. We're going to do what we call a fireside chat. Just going to ask Ken a few questions and let him respond as he would like. So the first one, Ken, we all know that Mewburn likes to sort of fly under the radar. You've been around a long time, and a lot of folks want to know why in the world, if your operations are in the Permian and New Mexico, why are you headquartered here in Tyler, Texas?
Right. Well, that's a great question, Gates, and let me begin by just thanking you for the opportunity to speak today. It's a privilege to to be here with everybody. And I'd also like to thank Commissioner Christian for your service and your leadership. I think all of us in the oil and gas industry at times feel like, I've joked we need to attend a 12-step program for recovering oil men. And it's nice to hear your enthusiasm. So we appreciate that very much. And, you know, after 40 years at Mewburn Oil Company, Gates, I think I know a little bit about the company. And I see my friend Monty Whetstone out there. Monty and I have both spent 40 years there. And he teases me that I couldn't get a job anywhere else. But I think we've been there a long time because it's a special place. And, you know, Mewburn Oil Company was founded, of course, by Curtis Mewburn. And Mr. Mewburn was just an extraordinary man. He was raised in Shreveport, he and Joanne, and attended the University of Oklahoma and studied petroleum engineering. And after graduating, worked in the industry for a while and was just a classic entrepreneur. And he was living in Dallas, started Mewburn Oil Company in 1965, almost 60 years ago now. And got started really doing some things in West Texas because that's where he saw opportunity and where he had experience. And looked up in 1972, and I think he saw many of the same things we do today about Tyler, Texas, that he was raising a family of 3 daughters and trying to build a business, and ultimately decided that Tyler would be a wonderful place to work and to live and to raise his family. And a little closer to Shreveport as well, where he had some elderly parents. And so the company moved here in 1972. At the time, he had a small office in Midland with just a couple of employees and a small operations office in New Mexico as well. And interestingly enough, he had 2 ladies that worked for him in Dallas. And imagine this, he decided he was going to close the office in Dallas and move headquarters to Tyler. Both of those ladies came with him. I think that speaks to what they thought about him and the company. Marjorie Lotes and Galen Thompson were both with us a long time. And when I moved here in the 80s, they were like second mothers, frankly, to me. But so we're headquartered here in Tyler, accounting, HR, IT. We have about 125 people. But I think the reason it works for us, and by that I mean our activity is in the Anadarko and Permian basins, and we're now one of the larger and most active operators in those areas. One of Mr. Mewburn's central business philosophies was, let's be decentralized. We don't want to be bureaucratic. We want to be entrepreneurial. We want boots on the ground, so to speak. And so those of us in Tyler, and myself included at times, when we think about Mewburn Oil Company, I think we tend to think about our people here. But, you know, one of the things Curtis had always whispered to me was, don't ever forget that Mewburn Oil Company is really the people out there on the front lines. I have some wonderful friends with me today from Mewburn, and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We have 125 people here, but we have 600 people in our 7 other offices in Midland, Hobbs, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Perryton, Woodward, and just a very decentralized structure with great people out there. Probably not many people in Tyler know we have 350 people in Hobbs, New Mexico. And so it's a setup that works for us because of our structure. We believe it's a strength of ours that we're decentralized and we really empower our people out there in the districts. And I think it's one of the keys to our success. So headquarters here in Tyler, but really the people on the front lines out there doing the work for us are in the Permian and Anadarko basins, Gates.
Ken, Curtis Mewburn passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
How has his passing affected the company? And can you tell us a little bit about his operating philosophy that has resulted in the success of Mewburn Oil?
Well, Mr. Mewburn was an extraordinary man. And people like Mr. Whetstone and some of us had the privilege of working for him a long time, 38 years for me before he passed. And frankly, I think many of us knew him, I personally probably knew him as well as I knew my father. And Curtis used to joke, he was a tremendous planner, that the obituary for privately owned companies that don't survive the passing of the founder usually describes one of three issues. Either a lack of estate planning, which he had taken care of a long time ago with my friend Mr. Buckley out here, or too much debt. You know, when the founder passes away, you don't have the liquidity to pay the estate taxes, and we keep a rock solid balance sheet. And the third was a lack of management succession planning. And he'd kind of look at me and smile and say, I'm not so sure about that one. But I'm surrounded by a good team, and we're in good shape. And to Mr. Muburn's credit, he had really started stepping back a long time ago. And I think one of the strengths of the company, Gates, is we know who we are. We know what we do well, and we know what we don't do well. The guys get tired of me saying it. There's no identity crisis at Mubern Oil Company. To Commissioner Christian's point, we're proud to be an oil and gas company. We generate prospects. We grow through the drill bit in the Anadarko and Permian basins. And we miss Mr. Mubern every day. He was our head cheerleader. And there was nothing better than him coming by at the end of the day, encouraging you regardless of how challenging your day had been. But he had stepped away from the day-to-day business some time ago, and I think we've been firing on all cylinders for a long time, and he'd be proud of the great work that the team is doing today. And so, and it's just a real credit to Mr. Buckley's leadership, the family's commitment to the business, that we plan on being here for generations to come, Gates.
Well, obviously, Curtis Mubern he's a true legend in the oil patch. Can you share with us some of the lessons that you and the company have carried forward since then?
Absolutely. Admittedly, I'm biased, but I believe he was the greatest oil man of his generation. You look at Mubern Oil Company today, and you look at the impact he had on us, as well as the industry and energy education. Most people are familiar with what he did at OU. Frankly, that has been, what he did has encouraged others to do the same thing. Mr. Hurd at Texas Tech and others at A&M in Texas. But he was just an extraordinary man and a great oil man and a better human being. He was a great leader, and he would have been successful in any business, I think. But Mr. Mubern had an engineering background, and because of that, we are a strong engineering company. And certainly we're privately owned, and that helps. But I think at the end of the day, as I worked for him for all those years, and I look at us and how we're different from other companies, I've really grown to appreciate he had a very unique perspective about the soft side of the business. As technically strong as he was, he truly believed that our people were our greatest asset. And we just have a relentless focus on people and culture at our company. And and it started with him. And I learned it going through some tough times. I think Curtis Mubern at his finest, or was at his finest in the 90s, frankly, when the industry was, all of us were wandering in the desert, so to speak. Gates, the business was tough. We were no different. And the industry was consolidating, and we were giving it some consideration. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with him where he realized we needed to do some things like that ultimately would involve letting some people go. And he couldn't bring himself to do it. His eyes welled with tears, his voice choked up, because he knew those people wouldn't find jobs and they'd be gone from the industry forever. And we didn't do those things because he cared about the people, but more important than that, he truly believed that those people would add value to Mubern Oil Company, that they would help us be more profitable, that you can't cut your way to profitability really long term. That if you want to be a great oil and gas company, you have to have great people. You have to have great engineers like these gentlemen out here. That great people will build a great company. And I think that's what we've been able to do at Mewbourne Oil Company. And the longer I worked for him, the more I appreciated that. I think I love to study successful organizations, whether they're business or athletic organizations. And I think he just had a gift, and he realized, I'm sure people in this room have read many of Jim Collins' books, the prolific business author who's written Good to Great and other books. And he's concluded this, that organizations with sustained success understand that the right people will build the right culture and develop the right strategy. And that's been the key to Mewbourne Oil Company's success. When we've had problems, we haven't had the right people. And there have been times that was the situation. But, the ghost of Curtis Mewbourne whispers in me every day in my ear, Ken, if you get the right people in place, everything else will take care of itself. So really kind of an unusual gift for a gentleman that was very technical by background.
Well, he was quite a guy in many ways. The character, expertise, people management, everything. You mentioned recently one thing I thought was very interesting. I'm a fan of Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me something about the Buffett philosophy of the dip. Could you expand on that and how Mewbourne operates that way?
You bet. Well, I've never seen anybody that was so comfortable with risk, volatility, and uncertainty. And in fact, I think my friends at Mewbourne will never forget a speech he made one time where he talked about that he called them the four horsemen, Gates: risk, volatility, uncertainty, and change. And he embraced those things and recognized, he would say, they're your friend. And that, frankly, many times the greatest opportunity is in those periods of tremendous challenges. And to give you an example of kind of the bringing all this together at Mewbourne Oil Company, I think about 2020, really, when COVID hit. And all of us were struggling with a new paradigm. Of course, in the oil and gas business, prices collapsed. They were negative. And most of our production's in New Mexico, which is one of the most challenging places to operate. And regulators out there were campaigning for office with T-shirts that said, "Ban fracking." The governor was proposing some of the toughest environmental laws in the country. And oh, by the way, not too long thereafter, Mr. Mewbourne became critically ill. It was the most stressful time in my career at Mewbourne Oil Company. But it's a real credit to our team and our people and our culture. Everybody knew exactly what to do. We, of course, like everybody, were concerned first and foremost about the health and well-being of our people. And we did that. But we took advantage of the opportunity as well. And it had taken us 55 years to reach the milestone of 100,000 barrels of oil a day in terms of operated production. We went from 100 to 270 in 3 years through that volatility and uncertainty. And not only did we do that, because of the leadership of people like my friend out there, Mr. James Woodall, our manager of environmental compliance, Mr. Whetstone, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Owens, and others, the governor of New Mexico had mandated that we would capture at least 98% of our gas by 2025. Frankly, the industry went into a tither. We didn't know how we were going to get there or what we were going to do. We weren't sure what our emissions were. But I'm delighted to tell you today that as we sit here a year in advance of 2025, we know what our emissions are. And Mewburn Oil Company, we're far from perfect, but we don't do any routine venting or flaring, and our gas capture rate is 99.7%. And I couldn't be more proud of our team. And that really is an example of what you're talking about, Gates, how we embraced the volatility and the challenges, and our great people went to work. And to your point, I think Mr. Buffett's quip is, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. And Curtis instilled that in our organization.
You know, 2 or 3 months ago, I read somewhere, I was really surprised. Occidental Petroleum had 24 rigs running.
Yeah.
ConocoPhillips had 23. Mewburn had 22. How can you do that? You're up there with the largest producers in the Permian.
Right, right.
And they're big public companies.
Right. Well, my friends would want me to correct you, Gates, and tell you we're running 24 rigs.
It's 24.
Actually 25 now, isn't it, Monty?
All right.
But again, it's many things. It's a credit to Roe and the family and the commitment by the family to the oil and gas business. It speaks to the financial wherewithal of the company, the people that we have and the opportunities. And it's just been really a magical story, Gates. The goal for Mewburn Oil Company was never to be the biggest company, and we're not, but we're certainly one of the larger companies in the business today, public or private, and one of the more active companies in the areas we operate. Our goal is just, we want to be one of the best, and we want to do things the right way. And we've been very fortunate, again, because of the great work of our people and our culture, to get it done. And I think the seeds for what we're doing today were really planted about 10 to 15 years ago. Mewburn Oil Company had been around for 45 years when the shale revolution hit the industry. And we were producing about 150 million cubic feet a day and 3,000 barrels of oil. And it was a wonderful company, but it had taken us 45 years to get to that point, and we were drilling Morrow gas wells, and we were really good at it, I think. But the shale revolution was emerging, and our Permian team realized what was going on. And in that 45-year period in the Permian Basin, we had accumulated about 45,000 acres of land. Unfortunately, none of it was where you wanted to be when the shale revolution emerged. You really wanted to be deeper into the basin where you have higher pressures and the shale packages are thicker. And so the whole industry was undergoing this wonderful time of exploration. The companies were trying to crack the code on what was going to work and what was not going to work. We were very fortunate. We just had an exceptional team in Hobbs and Midland who recognized what was going on. And they did some fantastic work that gave us the confidence to move forward aggressively. And we did. And today, we not only, I said earlier, we operated about 3,000 barrels of oil today, or in 2010. We operate a lot more than that today. We're pushing 300,000 barrels of oil today.
Wow.
And the seeds of that were planted by the great work this group of people did and our people in the Permian Basin 10 to 15 years ago when the shale revolution emerged.
What a story. With all the consolidation in the industry and obviously out in the Permian, rumors float around all the time about who's next. And obviously Mewburn is one of the who's next. What are the chances that Mewburn would get sold?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, Gates. you know, there've been a lot of rumors floating around, and of course, some of them are natural with Mr. Muburn's passing and Exxon buying Pioneer and let's see, Oxy buying Crown Quest, and now Diamondback buying Endeavor. I'm absolutely rock solid confident that Mubern Oil Company is not going to buy a major oil company.
I love it.
No, of course I'm joking. And
If Muburn's not for sale, how about those lots across the street on Old Bullard Road?
that's
Are they
right. No, I think I appreciate you asking that because it is important, and we'd prefer to fly under the radar and rumors fly around, and we don't want them to affect our business, our people. But again, I think it speaks to the commitment of the Mubern family. Mr. Mubern individually, he was a unique individual, and he was never in it for the money. He loved the business. We're blessed to have Rose's son Hale working for us in Midland. Drew's son Griffin works for us here in Tyler. We'll have 37 interns this summer.
Wow.
We plan on being here for generations to come. And like my friend Commissioner Christian, we believe there's a future in the business, and Mubern Oil Company plans on being here.
Well, Wayne mentioned all the excessive regulations that are everywhere. In particular, the newest methane deal. Tell me a little bit about how Mubern approaches the regulatory environment, and what are the challenges that you do see facing those issues going forward?
Well, it's no doubt it's one of the largest challenges I think we in the industry will face in the years to come. Gates is the tremendous regulatory burden, the environmental challenges. We've been we've had to learn the hard way, frankly. Operating in New Mexico has been a blessing and a curse in some ways. We've had to get up to speed faster, perhaps, than we otherwise would have by operating out there. I think many of the things that I talked about earlier are lessons we've learned that we're applying in other areas we operate. And they've made us a better operator. We're reducing our environmental footprint. I talked about our gas capture rate. We move 800,000 barrels of water a day. That's enough to fill up Lake Tyler in a year. And Monty and his team do that, and we do it very well. We recycle much of it and use very little fresh water. And I think those skills are going to be important for operators in the years to come. And Mubern Oil Company now has the scale and the resources to deal with those things. Commissioner Christian spoke to it, and I think the challenge is going to be daunting for smaller companies that don't have the financial and technical resources to deal with some of this. There's a gentleman out in the audience here with us today, Brian Woodard, who's leading our regulatory team. And I mentioned we have 350 people in Hobbs, 400 people in the Permian. I bet we have 50 people working in environmental and regulatory out there at Gates. And so it's a real challenge. But we have the resources to deal with it. I think we learned a long time ago you can complain about it all day long, and we will advocate for reasonable change and reasonable regulations, but that it's here to stay whether we like it or not, and we need to embrace it. And we believe we're an industry leader in drilling completions and production, and we want to be an industry leader in the environmental and safety side as well. But it's going to be a challenge for the industry, and that combined with some of the other things that Commissioner Christian talked about, the access to capital, insurance. The publicly owned companies, of course, are facing different challenges on top of that. If you're if you're a small to medium sized publicly owned oil and gas company, frankly, you're irrelevant to Wall Street. And that is driving a lot of the consolidation among those people. There's a company, Cord Energy, that bought Interplus, and all of those companies that are, they're not so small, but they're less than $10 billion in market capitalization. They've got to get bigger to become relevant to Wall Street. And then the large companies, there's been this narrative that we're running out of good drilling locations in the industry. People will call it drilling inventory or PUD inventory. And that drove a lot, that drove like the Exxon Pioneer deal and the Diamondback Endeavor deal, because those people, the best rocks in this country are in the Permian Basin in terms of the oil and gas business. That's why half the rigs are running out there, and half this country's production is in the Permian. And why most of the large acquisitions have been out there. People want to grow out there, but we've got some challenges coming at us, but I'm confident Mewbourne Oil Company is up to the challenge, Gates.
Well, I know you're optimistic about the growth and production growth out in the Permian. If you could put your forecast hat on, how do you see the growth? There's a lot of naysayers. You know, the Wall Street Journal says, oh, it's peaked. In a couple of years, you're going to see the decline curve set in.
Right.
But obviously, in your mind, that's not true. In addition to that, when you put on your forecast hat, are you talking about zones unproven below the Delaware Basin?
Right. No, that's a great question. And you know, the country produces about 13.3 million barrels a day. We grew that from 12.1 last year. So we were up 1.2 million last year, and a fair amount of that was in the Permian. You know, the Permian produces about 6 million barrels a day, and my friends in Midland would want me to tell you that if the Permian were a standalone country, it'd be the third largest producer in the world, behind Russia and Saudi Arabia. That's how important it is. I think production will continue to grow out there for the foreseeable future. The rate of growth will slow down, though. Our rate of growth has slowed down at Mewbourne Oil Company, but we're still growing. And I think you'll see in the country production growth maybe this year in the order of magnitude of about 400,000 barrels, and probably half of that, if not more, will be in the Permian. If you follow Exxon and Chevron at all, when they talk about growth in the business, they'll talk about growing in the Permian Basin. Both of them have kind of coined the term a million barrel march. They're trying to get to the rate of 1 million barrels of oil equivalent per day out there in the Permian. So I think we can still grow production in this country. The rate of growth is going to slow down, and it will be in the existing zones we're in, but you made a good point, Gates, and I'm glad you did. There's still opportunity out there for exploration and finding oil and gas in new horizons, and we're doing it today. And Mewbourne Oil Company is involved in some really exciting things today that we think are going to pay dividends in the years to come. And that's one of the wonderful things about the business. You would think after all these years, all the oil and gas would be found or discovered, but here we are because of the people and the technology and the innovation. So.
Excuse me. So if you look around, it's a lot of the high school, college grads that are looking ahead at their future. Many of them wonder about this oil and gas business. You know, they want to be sustainable this and sustainable that. What do you see as the future of a career for some of these folks coming along? And is it changing?
Right. Well, that's a softball for me. So thank you for teeing that one up. And I agree with my friend, Commissioner Christian. And I think it's something we need to address. And frankly, I'm concerned about it. Not enough young people are going into the business. Mr. Mewbourne have been incredibly generous to OU, and I've had the privilege of being involved up there for 30 years now, and we're active at Texas Tech and other places. And enrollment in traditional energy education fields, petroleum engineering, geology, energy management, has collapsed. It is bottomed out and starting to go back up because countries are beginning to recruit a little bit, and kids are finding jobs. But we're going to need young people in the years to come. Commissioner Christian talked about it. It's a math and a physics problem. We know we're going to be using oil and gas for generations to come. We know the narrative that he spoke to, that, you know, if that the climate crisis is the greatest existential threat to humanity that we've ever had, and that if we would just boldly transition to green energy as fast as possible and develop the policies to do that, we know that that's not correct. We know that it's much more complicated than that, that it's incredibly frustrating for those of us in the industry. We need to do a better job of telling our story, talking about the good things we've done. We know that not every natural disaster is caused by global warming. We know that climate change is serious business and that human activity has contributed to part of it. But we also know, as he said, that the cleanest energy in the world is produced in this country. And it makes no sense to be importing more oil from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or things of that nature. That the greenest energy initiative on the planet, and these are Toby Rice's words, the CEO of EQT, is American LNG. And the pause on it is madness. That every time we export LNG, the worldwide demand and use of coal, the rate of growth slows down. The Chinese are permitting 2 coal plants a week. And we also know that the energy system is just very complicated, and we're going to need an all-of-the-above approach. So absolutely there's a future for young people in this business, and I would tell them that oil demand was up 2 million barrels a day last year, and all we talk about is renewables and green energy, and we're doing everything we can, and we should. There are 1 billion people on this planet that have won the lottery. Those of us in this room that live in the US, Europe, and Japan, we have access to education, health care, and affordable, reliable, secure energy. There are 7 billion people on the planet that don't, and their population is growing. Wayne spoke to it. Forecasts are that there will be another couple million barrels or a couple billion people by 2050. They want access to the energy that we have, that we can provide. And we don't talk enough about the millions of people that die every day or every year, because they don't have access to that energy that we can provide. And so I'm absolutely confident we're going to need oil and gas in the years to come, and there's an opportunity for people to have a wonderful career like we've had. You know, the obituary for the oil and gas business has been written many times. It was written when I graduated in 1983, and it was wrong then, and I believe it's wrong today. You spoke to Mr. Buffett, and another one of his sayings that I'm fond of is, forecasts tell you a great deal about the forecaster, but they tell you very little about the future. And so I'm careful about making forecasts. But I would say this, I believe there's a future in this business, and that I've learned not to underestimate the people of the oil and gas business. And that I believe in the years to come, we'll be providing affordable, reliable oil and gas in an environmentally friendly manner, and Mewbourne Oil Company will be a big part of it.
Ken, that's quite a story.
thank you for your wit, your wisdom, your observations about the future in careers and oil and gas. I know that we've got a couple of minutes here. I know of one question from the floor. I think Ernie LaFleur over there had one, and we might have room for another one after that. Ernie, what was your question?
Well, I think I probably already heard the answer from the dialogue, but I was curious with the push for carbon
Right.
sequestration and other alternative energy approaches, whether any of that was likely to be in the
Right.
future. I suspect not. I appreciate your comment.
No, that's a great question, Ernie. And I think one of the things I've learned is never to say never at Mewbourne Oil Company. The notion that we'd be the scale we are today and doing what we're doing, and I mentioned the water, that was really a byproduct of, we obviously want to produce the oil and gas and move it. And I think if there's an opportunity that makes sense for us, we're entrepreneurial, we are resourceful. We have the skill set, obviously, and the people to move and manage fluids and understand reservoirs. And I could see it down the road someday. We don't have any near-term plans. And some of that goes back to, I think, again, we know who we are. There's not an identity crisis, and we're really good at what we do. When we get outside our lane, we're not so good. But we also try to be opportunistic. And so I think, I'm sure you and I would agree, I'm hopeful that'll be a big part of the future of solving some of these tough energy problems. I think it has to be part of the future. And so there certainly could be opportunity for us.
Looks like on this clock right here, we might have room enough for one more question if anyone else has something that they want to ask Ken.
Hey, Bob.
Sit up.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that? Can we keep up with pace, and what are going to be the
No, that's a wonderful question, Bob, and I should have spoken to that earlier. That is one of the challenges we have, is there's not enough infrastructure. And you would think there would be in a mature basin like the Permian. We're in good shape on the oil side, but I'm sure you're aware, and others are in this room, natural gas prices in the Permian are terrible right now. In fact, as we sit here today, they're actually negative. And we need, I need my marketing department over here to get to work, Bob. We don't want to give that stuff away, but there's not enough pipeline capacity out there. The oil production has grown, but the associated gas has along with it. And that's a problem in, if our friends were here from the Marcellus, obviously they need more takeaway capacity there. We could produce a whole lot more natural gas in this country and export LNG, but we need more infrastructure. And you would hope that would be an area where our political leadership in DC could come together, because, the people that are pushing renewable projects can't permit those projects in a timely manner. You and I have talked about some of that, and so hopefully we can find common ground for permitting reform for all sources of energy that would allow us to move more efficiently.
Good answer. Let's thank Ken for today and for his story and for his feeling about the oil and gas business.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Howdy, my name's Tom Trimble. I'm with Encore Electric Delivery. I'm on the Chamber Board, I'm on the Energy Committee, and I'm on the Energy Summit Committee. And it's my privilege and honor to welcome our next speaker. I first learned of this gentleman years ago from my boss, Charles Elk, down there. Over the years, I've listened to him, read his material, and watched his products because Robert Bryce is an author, a journalist, and a film producer. He's been writing about energy, politics, and innovation for more than 3 decades. He's the author of 6 books, including his latest, A Question of Power, Electricity and the Wealth of Nations, in which he talks about what Mr. Waits was just talking about. Bryce is also a producer of a new 5-part docuseries called Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid. I've watched every episode, all 5 episodes, and if you want to, you can watch them too because they're available free on YouTube. So after this deal, go out and watch those on YouTube. You can also follow him on Substack at robertbryce.substack.com, which I subscribe to, and it's very thought-provoking information. He lives in Austin with his wife, Lauren, who is a teacher, photographer, and master potter. Please welcome Robert Bryce.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. 13 months ago, in fact, it'll be exactly 13 months ago tomorrow, was standing on a metal stage that was metal platform, metal grate platform. It's about this wide and probably twice this wide. It was with a group of about a dozen people, and we were facing east toward the Pacific Ocean. It was a cool day, a little windy, a few clouds. We were about, I would guess, 100 or 120 feet above the level of the Pacific, and we could see the Pacific behind these structures that were right in front of us. And one of the structures, in front of one of the structures, in fact, was the biggest crane I've ever seen. And I'm incredibly fortunate in my life. I've traveled the world a little bit. This crane must have been 300 feet tall. I mean, just enormous. And it was standing immediately next to reactor number 1 at Fukushima Daiichi. So reactor number 1 was here, reactor 2 was here, reactor 3 and reactor 4. This was the closest we were going to be allowed to get to the reactors at Fukushima Daiichi. And just a little bit of background, getting to the plant site, which of course was on the Pacific, we went through Fukushima Prefecture, which had been completely depopulated. It was a ghost town, which was rather eerie. All these grocery stores, houses, businesses, and no people, which of course we now know was a mistake. To move those people away from their homes, their businesses, was in fact more deadly than leaving them in place. No one died of radiation, remember, at Fukushima Daiichi, not a single person. 2 workers at the plant died, they drowned. So we're 120 feet above the level of the Pacific, and our guides from TEPCO, from Tokyo Electric Power Company, are explaining what happened at Fukushima Daiichi. The power plant lost power. One of the things you have to have in an electric power plant is power. And then once the tsunami hit, and they were prepared for a tsunami of 7 meters, they got hit by a tsunami of 15 meters. And the standby generators were at about 6 meters above sea level. So why do I tell you about this visit to Fukushima Daiichi? Well, for several reasons. One, I'm adamantly pro-nuclear. I've been pro-nuclear for a long time. If you're anti-nuclear and you're anti-carbon dioxide, you're pro-blackout. Well, I'm anti-blackout. Or as Tom Trimble was lecturing me this morning, don't call them blackouts, it's a load shed event. And I thought, oh my Lord. I'm already getting the spin from Encore here. Load shed event. But the visit to Fukushima was pivotal for me because to see that plant, right, which we'd heard so much about, and we hear so much about the destruction from the plant and we forget about what happened in the tsunami. Not a single person in Japan died of radiation. 20,000 people died in the span of an hour or so from the tsunami and the earthquake. And that event today is pivotal in Japan's history. And yet what is happening today in Japan? They're restarting their nuclear power plants. And in the 2 weeks that I was in Japan, now almost exactly a year ago, We met with the contingent I was with. We met with top government officials, top utility officials, top people in the nuclear industry. And at every meeting, and we had 6 or 7 meetings with some of the top people in the country, I asked the same question, well, what about CO2? What about climate change? What's your climate action plan? And in every meeting, the response was the same, oh yeah, well, energy security is our first concern. I said, well, this is the home of the Kyoto Protocol. Are you going to meet your, no, we're not going to meet our targets. Energy security is their first concern. So what is Tokyo Electric Power Company doing today? They're building an ultra supercritical coal plant on Tokyo Bay. In fact, the second plant is going to come online this year. How many of you read about that in the New York Times? Go ahead and raise your hand. How many of you know that there are about 2 gigawatts of new coal-fired capacity in Japan coming online and about 5 gigawatts of new gas-fired capacity? Go ahead, raise your hand. Doesn't fit the narrative, does it? Doesn't fit the narrative about this idea of the energy transition. The claims that we are in the midst of an energy transition that is inexorable and cannot be avoided. Now, let me be clear before I start about my politics, because I'm going to talk a lot about the Biden administration. I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I am disgusted. Absolutely, totally, completely disgusted. We have 330 million people in this country, and in November we can only choose between Doddering Fool 1 and Doddering Fool 2. There's no one else we can choose from. But I digress. Here's President Biden in 2022 talking about an incredible transition. Here is the Sierra Club last year talking about clean energy and transitioning to clean energy. Here is the White House in a press release from December. Again, clean energy transition. I'm going to tell you that what we are hearing about this energy transition is in fact a very well-funded campaign. Very well-funded, backed by some of the biggest NGOs in America who are operating on budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, who are allied very closely with big business, big law firms, and the NGOs themselves to push this idea of the energy transition. Now, what is the great industrial analyst, his name is escaping me, he said, but in God we trust, all others bring data. Okay, well, I brought some data for you. So here is the New York Times. You can do this yourself. You can go to the archives of the New York Times and search by a date range for a certain idea, a certain phrase. Search for your own name to see if your own name's been in the New York Times. I borrowed this idea from my friend Roger Pilkey Jr. He showed me how to do it. Very simple. What happened during does this thing have a pointer on it? There it is. Yeah. Oh, it has a pointer. It doesn't work. Okay. Yeah, it kind of does. Okay, 2015. Here's my pointer. 2015, 2016. Biden, the end of the Obama years, the Trump years. Yeah, an energy transition doesn't really appear in the New York Times. But then what happens in 2021? Well, Joe Biden is elected. And then for the following 2 years, you see this massive spike in the use of the phrase energy transition. Well, what did the energy transition only started when President Biden got into office? Well, no, what happened when President Biden came into office is a very concerted media effort to convince the public that there's an energy transition underway. That's the reality. In reality, there is no energy transition underway. There is a program, a marketing effort to promote the idea of the energy transition, but in reality, there is no proof in the data. And when I look at numbers like this, show me where the energy transition, I'm from Oklahoma, I'm a little slow. Go slowly, don't use big words. I'm gonna hit you with a bunch of numbers today. I'm gonna drop a stat bomb on your head, so get ready. Not my numbers, the numbers. Statistical Review of World Energy and Bloomberg New Energy Finance. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, $4.1 trillion was spent on wind and solar between 2004 and 2022. In that time frame, wind and solar went from 0 contribution to global energy to about 32 exajoules, or 5% of global primary energy. Over that same time period, hydrocarbons, I don't call them fossil fuels, by the way. I call them hydrocarbons. It's a more correct term. Coal, oil, and natural gas, 86% of global energy, 384 exajoules, goes to 494 exajoules in 2022. Statistical review of world energy numbers, not my numbers. Despite $4.1 trillion spent, hydrocarbon growth was 3.4 times faster than the growth in wind and solar combined. Where is this energy transition of which you speak? There is no evidence in the numbers. By the way, wait. How many engineers in the audience? Go ahead, raise your hand. Go ahead. Now keep your hands up if you're an engineer and you know what an exajoule is. Oh boy. Who's ahead of this outfit here? All right. This is where the finger wagging starts. You need to know your exajoules and your SI units. Kilo, mega, giga, peta, exazeta, yoda. 10 to the 3rd to 10 to the 24th. How many of you have heard of yoda? You all should nod your heads. Do or do not, there is no try. Yoda, remember him? Yeah. Yoda is septillion. 1 exajoule is 1 quintillion joules. 1 joule is 1/1000th of a BTU, or put it together, 1 BTU is 1,000 joules, plus or minus, not exact. 1 quadrillion BTUs. Raise your hand if you've heard of a quadrillion BTUs. Yes. 1 exajoule is roughly equal to a quad. It's roughly equal to the energy contained in 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Why should you know this? Because you're energy professionals. Yes, right. We're energy professionals. You need to know your units. Statistical Review of World Energy publishes its data in SI units. You need to know your units. You know these: kilo, mega, giga, you hear them: kilo, mega, giga, tera, peta, exazeta, yoda. Okay, finger wagging is over for now. What energy transition? Not my numbers, the numbers. 6 largest economies in the world. China on the bottom, then India, the US, Germany, UK, Japan. Germany is wasting, I use that word correctly, at least $500 billion on the energy venda with this idea they're going to change the trajectory of global CO2 emissions. Well, again, go slowly and tell me how you're going to make that happen when you constitute such a small part of global CO2 emissions and when China and India are growing so rapidly. Look at these numbers. Look at these numbers. They're the same set of numbers. Same set of numbers. I did a stack chart versus a bar chart. I like to use horizontal bar charts. I think they're easier to read. Same numbers in a different format. The US has decreased on an absolute basis its CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world since 2000. How many of you read about that in the New York Times? Doesn't fit the narrative. Tom Trumbull saw it in the New York Times. The U.S. has reduced its CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world. Why is that? Well, okay, wind and solar, I don't call them renewables, I don't call them green, I don't call them clean, I call them alt energy. Renewable, clean, and green are marketing terms. Wind and solar helped, but the big reason the U.S. reduced its CO2 emissions as much as it did is nat gas displacing coal in the power sector. I'm okay with that. I do worry that we're becoming too dependent on natural gas in the power sector, but that's a slightly different story. We have enormous amounts of coal in this country and we're not using it. And in fact, we're shutting down all of our coal plants. We're making our grid too dependent on one fuel. But I digress. What energy transition? 2022, in the United States, gas consumption grew twice as fast as wind and solar combined. It's incredible. In 2022, the growth in nat gas in the U.S. was 5.4%. That's an enormous increase on what a base of what, 100 BCF a day? 5% increase is an enormous increase given the scale of that energy consumption. And this is, again, changes in exajoules per year. How many of you know what an exajoule is? Thank you. Wind and solar went up 0.5, 0.3, coal went down, oil went up, and nat gas went up 1.6. The net growth in hydrocarbons was 1.5 exajoules versus 0.8 exajoules in wind and solar. What happened last year? Latest data from the EIA, Energy Electric Power Monthly, just came out at the end of February, so we have reliable data. Remarkably, despite adding 6 gigawatts of new wind capacity, wind output last year fell 2%. Which begs the question, if we're facing climate change, and I'm not saying we aren't, climate change is a concern. It is not our only concern. And further, if we're facing climate change and we're facing more extreme weather, hotter, colder for longer, why in the name of God's green earth would we make our most important energy network dependent on the weather? Am I missing something? No, thank you. I try to fact check myself. It's the height of idiocy or the depth of foolishness. I don't know which it is. I don't know if it's tall or short, but we can't make our most important energy network dependent on the weather if we're facing more extreme weather, and yet that's exactly what is happening. But the growth in gas consumption is truly remarkable. See, 115 terawatt hour increase in electricity generation. It's going to go up again likely this year because of coal retirements, but wind and solar only grew by a net of 12 terawatt hours. So if you look at the electric generation side, which is where the only part of the energy system that wind and solar contribute to, gas it's routing wind and solar. It's not even close. And part of that is because, I pity you if you're in the gas business. I just looked at Henry Hub today. The spot price is what, $1.60? $1.62? How do you ever make money at that? So we're told energy transition, we're going to switch to wind and solar. And my response is, okay, tell me the three key things. If you're going to build this energy stuff, where are you going to put it? How are you going to connect it? How are you going to pay for it? Well, you don't answer the thing, where are you going to put it? Warren Buffett's been mentioned. In 2021, MidAmerican Energy, a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, which is headed, of course, by Warren Buffett. In 2014, Warren Buffett famously said the only reason to build wind turbines is to get the tax credits. Otherwise, they make no sense. And in 2021, a subsidiary of his corporate empire sued Madison County, Iowa, to try to force the county to take a wind project that they didn't want. Raise your hand if you read about that in the New York Times. You might have read it because I wrote about it in Forbes, and that's where this headline is from. In late 2022, MidAmerican abandoned their lawsuit, which was a PR disaster of the first order, and said, okay, never mind, right? We're gonna pick on this little county, Madison County. You see that's the Redmond Bridge, bridges of Madison County. My daughter Mary made that graphic, which I quite like. There's no wind turbine behind the Redmond Bridge. But it's an iconic location. And Madison County, Iowa, is a pretty prosperous county. And they said, we don't want your wind turbines. And all across America, local people are saying, we don't want your wind turbines. We don't want your solar panels. Go put them somewhere the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Don't put them here. Madison County, Iowa, Cherokee County, Kansas, Reno County, Kansas, San Bernardino County, California, the largest county by area in America in 2019, banned large-scale renewable energy projects. Vermont, how many Bernie bros in the audience? I know there are probably not many. Can't build wind projects in Vermont. Meeker and Chippewa counties in Minnesota just adopted moratoriums on an all-new alt-energy Gage County, Nebraska. Druze, last summer in June, in the Golan Heights, the Druze Arabs who live in that area, it's on the Israeli side of the Syria-Israeli border, rioted for 2 days in opposition to a wind project. Dozens of people went to the hospital. After it happened, the Israeli police told Netanyahu, you go ahead and try and build that wind project. We are not going to be providing security. Well, that project never went forward, and now, of course, Israel is dealing with other issues. These are not my numbers. These are the numbers. I've compiled them in the Renewable Rejection Database, which is on my website, robertbryce.com. I've been compiling this stuff since 2015. Why? Because I'm just a hard head. And God we trust, all others bring data. What's the data? Over at least 418 rejections of wind across the U.S. from Maine to Hawaii since 2015. This story makes me smile. I told you I'm from Oklahoma. I have deep roots in Oklahoma. Proud of my Oklahoma roots. My great uncle Ernie Rapp was a member of the Osage tribe. My cousin Nora has an Osage headright. I'm a member of the Cherokee tribe. Last December, a federal court judge in Tulsa, in the longest running legal battle against wind energy in American history, sided with the Osage tribe and ordered that the Enel, the Italian company, take down 84 wind turbines it built illegally in Osage County, Oklahoma. They built them illegally. Ejectment is a new term for me. Injunctive relief. This happened in December. It will now likely cost Enel more money to take down those wind turbines than it cost them to build them, at least $300 million. And the tribe is saying, we want them gone. And the tribe is featured in our docuseries. Tom mentioned it earlier in episode 3, Green Dreams. We interviewed 5 members of the Osage tribe. I've been following this story for 4 years. And I can't tell you how happy I was when this federal court judge made this ruling. And when those turbines start coming down, I'm going to be there cheering with both hands about this ruling. Because the company was warned in 2014, got a letter directly sent to them by the Bureau of Indian Affairs telling them, you must stop work until you get a permit to mine on Osage tribal land. Osage own their minerals. That's the story of the Killers of the Flower Moon. How many of you seen the movie? It's quite a remarkable film. Nominated for 10 Academy Awards, didn't get any. Still a remarkable film. But tells the story of what? Outsiders coming into Osage County, Oklahoma, taking advantage, in that case, murdering members of the Osage tribe. It's exactly the same story with the Italians. Now, they didn't kill anybody, but they ignored the Osage Nation and the tribe's sovereignty. And the federal court judge has sided with them. These are the solar rejections. Again, all in the renewable rejection database. Nobody in big wind or big solar has ever doubted any of the entries in here. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to act. They act like, this is just isolated cases, or the opposition is being fomented by, of course, evil oil and gas companies like Mewbourne Oil. I'm sure they're part of the whole deal. Oh, no. Yeah, we're funding all that. And there's a concerted media effort now, in fact, underway by the big wind and solar companies to pass legislation, in fact, to override local communities. The total now is 631, this including the ones that have just happened in the last few days. I just updated this is total of solar and wind rejections. And now in New York, California, Michigan, and Illinois, state legislatures have passed measures that Bigfoot local communities to force them to take wind and solar projects they don't want. And the American Clean Power Association, which I'll come back to in just a minute, which is operating on a budget of about $70 million a year, is now trying to get more legislation passed in other states that will have similar, pass a similar legislation that will give bureaucrats in state capitals the authority to override local zoning to force small communities to take wind and solar projects they don't want. That's how unpopular wind and solar is across America. And it's scaring these people witless because there is so much money at stake. So let's talk about the grid now. And this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, writing about. And Tom was kind enough to show me around the Encore yard this morning and talking to some of those linemen. I love those guys. They're all big dudes. And they all, they like to, I'm a generalization, they're raw bone men, and they know what they're about. And they probably chew, and they probably, but they're the guys who turn wrenches. And they're the guys who make things work in this country. And we're told over and over and over by the Department of Energy, by Princeton University, by Stanford University, by Cal Berkeley, by elite universities, elite academics, NGOs, the Sierra Club, we're just going to make this massive expansion of the grid. And I sit there and I think, do tell. And again, go slowly, because there's no evidence that the grid is expanding at anything like the pace that the Department of Energy put in this report they published last February. One of the worst reports. I've read a lot of reports. It was terrible. No indication about how big the high voltage no numbers on how large the high voltage transmission grid is or at what pace it's expanding. Instead, they just say we need 57% growth. Oh, okay. Well, how large is the high voltage transmission network? It's about 240,000 miles. Between 2008 and 2023, we built about 1,700 miles a year. It's actually slightly lower than that. And at that rate, building that 136,000, it's going to take 80 years. Oh, well, maybe we better get started. You think? And yet this Department of Energy reports, well, yeah, we're just going to do this because, wind and solar, and we're just going to build all this high voltage transmission. The hell you are. Here, the actual number of miles, it's actually declining. 2013 was a big year. That was the year that Texas built the CREZ lines. So we had 4,200 miles of high voltage capacity built that year. Almost all of it was built in Texas. Now, this is C3 Group's numbers out of Atlanta. They keep the best database that I know. They say 1,250 miles was built last year. Standard & Poor's actually puts that number at about 500. So this situation may be even worse than what I'm portraying here. Now, here's this Princeton study, the Net Zero America study has been lauded in this front page cover story in The Economist, written about in the New York Times, repeatedly hyped by various media outlets. They say we need to build 75,000 miles of new high voltage transmission in the next 10 years. Well, that's 7,500 miles a year. That's the bottom line. My pointer is not helping here. This can't really highlight it. The biggest year is 4,200. The average build from 08 to 2023 is 1,677 miles. We'll have to quadruple the current rate of growth at least to meet what we're told by the elite academics. Oh, this is what we should be doing. Right. Funny, I didn't see any of them out in the lineman yard at Encore's service center this morning. They have no idea, frankly, what they're talking about. None. But they keep promoting this fiction, and it gets promoted in the pages of the New York Times over and over. And I've written for the New York Times. I understand what the business is. But these reporters and these academics have no concept of the system of systems that we live in. We live in a network of networks, and the grid is the obvious example of this. We have a network of transformer manufacturers who ship their stuff to the yard here in Tyler that the linemen then take out and put on poles, and pad-mounted transformers and all the rest of it. That's a system that is interconnected with this other system. And the idea that we're just radically going to grow it in a matter of a couple years is pure fallacy. Meanwhile, the inflation rates in utility products is soaring. This is data from my friend Matt Brandrup at the Rural Electric Supply Cooperative in Wisconsin. Roughly a 50% increase in cost in just 3 years. That's for conductors, transformers, et cetera. And meanwhile, this per mile cost of high voltage transmission has nearly tripled since 2008. Not my numbers, C3 Group's numbers. And yet, we're just going to build all this stuff. Oh, really? Who's going to pay for it? Where are you going to put it? This is, I haven't shown anyone else this slide. You're the first to see it. But I just pulled the numbers from PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, just to compare how much high voltage transmission we're building. So the high voltage transmission is purple. Gas transmission, we're actually building, we're not building a lot of gas pipeline capacity, but we're actually building more gas pipelines and hazardous material pipelines than we are high voltage transmission. I was surprised by this. I don't know if any of you are. But again, not my numbers, the numbers. What about reliability? I just got a bid for a Generac at my house in Austin, about $16,000. And I'm probably going to do it. Why? Because I live in central Austin, fairly close to the Zilker Park. It's a nice house. It's not a mansion. It's a nice place. We've had 3 extended blackouts in my house since last August. And, well, okay, I can't rely on the grid. Maybe I better take this into my own hands. So I'm probably going to plumb in a new gas line just to the Generac, and I'm going to have to pay $400 a year for the maintenance contract. But having reliable power matters to me because I lived through Winter Storm Uri in February 3 years ago, and I lost power for 2 days. The grid is becoming less and less reliable, and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation in August of last year talked about the grid, which increasingly characterizes one sensitive to extreme, widespread, and long-duration temperatures as well as wind and solar droughts. Again, we're building the grid that is going to be weather dependent, and NERC is saying, well, why are we making the grid more dependent on wind and solar? And what else did they say? They named policy as a reliability risk factor. They're pointing the fingers at politicians, not at you, Commissioner Christian, I don't think, saying, what are you doing? I won't read this to you, but one of the most interesting parts of this is that FERC and NERC have both been pointing out that natural gas and electricity markets are not aligned. And we see that here in Texas, where the system is becoming, the gas system and the electric grid are becoming very closely interwoven, but they're not regulated together. This is a problem. It's a problem for reliability long term, and as I mentioned earlier, a problem for long-term reliability, and I think for costs. These are load shed events, not blackouts. According to DOE numbers, up 13x between 2000 and 2022. The 2023 numbers are not complete yet, but blackouts, brownouts, load shed events, unplanned outages, whatever term you like, they're going up. And what is happening? People like me are buying Generacs. And in fact, if you watch Generac stocks come down a lot, but they're still doing an amazing business. But then we quoted Warren Buffett, got to quote the late Charlie Munger, who was also the head of Berkshire, or one of the, I guess, is Warren Buffett's right-hand man. Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Where are all the tax incentives in America today? It's for wind and solar. The incentives for solar, this is DOE data, not my numbers, the numbers. And this is in quadrillion BTUs, which all of you know is roughly equal to an exajoule. Solar is getting 300 times more incentives and federal tax incentives than nuclear. Why aren't we building nuclear? Well, gee, I wonder why. Why are so many companies trying to build solar? That's where the money is. It was that great John Dillinger line. Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Why would anyone build anything but solar and those unconscionable those unconscionable subsidies to oil and gas? Oh, they're just making out like bandits. $30 million. And solar and wind, solar is getting $4 billion per exajoule and wind is getting $947 million. Where is the money going? Follow the money. Follow the money. First time I've shown this slide, first time I haven't published it yet. I'm going to. What's going on? Why is the Inflation Reduction Act so popular in corporate America? Because they are making out like bandits and they're lobbying like mad to make sure that the Inflation Reduction Act doesn't get repealed, or if Trump gets elected, it all stays in place. What we're seeing is a run on the Treasury in the name of climate change. And the board members on the American the Association, the American Clean Power Association, their board of directors, I went through and looked at the subsidy tracker, which is run by Good Jobs First, a nonprofit in Washington, and found out how much government money have they taken. Well, even if you take out JP Morgan Chase, which is 1.3 trillion, the total is still almost $78 billion. And of that, almost $28 billion goes to foreign companies, like Enel in Osage County, Oklahoma. Oh, well then what about those bandits at the American Petroleum Institute? Well, for whatever reason, they don't publish their board of directors. I had asked them for it. They wouldn't give it to me. So I went and found 20 of the largest oil and gas companies in America, did the same exercise, about $29 billion. So where's the money going? Who's getting the government money? Yeah, the oil and gas industry is getting some. Exxon, no surprise. Chevron, no surprise. But look at Phillips, minor, pioneer. What's Scott Sheffield doing? Why isn't he going to the federal government saying, I should get some more money? It's a fraction of what's going to the clean power business. Who pays for all this decarbonization stuff? I'm just enough of a liberal to believe that we shouldn't be punishing the poor. And yet in California, the state that has the highest poverty rate in America, all of these decarbonization mandates are just sticking it to the poor and the middle class. This is the change in absolute terms. In terms of price in California for a kilowatt hour of electricity on average for residential customers since 2008, when Arnold Schwarzenegger issued an executive order. It wasn't legislation, an executive order ordering the utilities to get 30% of their electricity from alt energy. What's happened? Electricity prices have gone up 15.1 cents. 15 cents increase. The average price of residential electricity in the United States today is 17 cents. Here in Texas, the average is about 17 cents, I think. Meanwhile, the US average 4.7 cents. And what else is happening? These big NGOs are pushing electrify everything, ban natural gas, even though these bans on natural gas are a clear violation of the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975. And the Ninth Circuit Court has found twice that is in fact a violation of the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975. It's not just that it's bad policy. It's not just bad for energy security. It's regressive. DOE numbers, not my numbers, published in August. On a per BTU basis, electricity costs 3 times more than natural gas. Where's the money coming from? Well, some of it's coming from one of the richest people in the world, Michael Bloomberg, worth something like $90 billion. In September, announced a $500 million gift to Beyond Carbon through his Bloomberg philanthropies. That quote in yellow is a direct quote from the press release that Bloomberg Philanthropies issued on September 20th. Shut down every last U.S. coal plant and slash gas plant capacity in half and block all new gas plants. What does that amount to? It's about 40%. If they achieve their goal, it's 40% of all the U.S. electricity generation that was generated in 2022, and they want to achieve this by 2030, which is just 5 years from now. So what is that, 1,800 terawatt hours of electricity? It's roughly equal to the electricity consumed by the 9 biggest states in America. I spoke in Washington at the end of last month at the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and there were a bunch of Sierra Club people in the audience and another guy from Earth Justice, and I pointed this out. And I made this point to that audience. It was a big audience, about 1,800 people or so, and I was flattered to be invited. And when you talk, you can kind of get a sense of where the audience is. And one point I said, the only thing dumber than onshore wind is offshore wind. The only thing dumber than onshore wind is offshore wind. And I could hear this like, did you really say that? You're not supposed to say that. There were a few laughs and a few titters like, oh, we're not supposed to respond to that. But in that speech, I made the point, and I'll make it here again. If Osama bin Laden was still alive, and may he rot in hell, and everyone like him, and another terrorist came along and said, we want to shut down 40% of all the generation in America over the next 5 years, they would be immediately investigated by the FBI as being a national security threat. That 1,800 terawatt hours of electricity is roughly equal to the consumption of the 9 biggest states in America. And when Michael Bloomberg says this, no one bats an eye. How much electricity are we actually talking about? I'm no genius, but I can do the math. And yet this isn't even being discussed. They want to actively undermine, and now the Sierra Club has sued Basin Electric Cooperative in Montana. They have sued to stop, they're trying to close Brandon Shore's coal plant, 1,200 megawatts in Maryland, even though PJM has said the closure of that plant will cause a myriad of reliability problems. And now Michael Bloomberg is giving the Sierra Club, Earth Justice, a dark money group that has an annual budget of $150 million, all this money so they can continue their lawfare, their legal assault on companies that produce electricity in America, to undermine the grid, and no one's saying anything about it, I guess except for me. But, this is what I do. Why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't it more of an issue of discussion about the reliability, affordability, and resilience of our most important energy network? It's being lost in this haze of, decarbonization. And meanwhile, what's happening in Europe is just an absolute disaster. These are the figures from the IEA. I did a screen grab and just, did a little clarification on it to sharpen up the image a little bit. In 2019, roughly 19% of all EU gas was coming from Russia. At the end of 2023, it was 12%. Europe, and particularly the Germans, bet their economies on Russian gas. They made a bad decision. And Trump was laughed at, and I'm no fan, but he was laughed at by the Europeans when they said, you're making yourself too reliant on Gazprom. And now what's happening? Deindustrialization of Europe. This is a screen grab from the IEA. This just came out in January. Electricity demand has fallen to the levels last seen 2 decades ago. Industrial demand is just plummeting, down 56 terawatt hours. And on top of the 55 terawatt hours that decline in 2022. And what sectors are are leaving Europe? Chemicals, paper, printing, steel, smelting. And when those industries leave, they're not coming back. Now, some of this is going to accrue to the benefit of the U.S. A lot of it's going to accrue to the benefit of Texas and Louisiana, because big German companies, big manufacturers, BASF and others are looking around the world and say, well, where can we go? You see, Natty at Henry Hub is $1.60. I have the rule of law, workforce, shipping, and those Texans are okay, I guess. We'll go to Texas or we'll go to Louisiana. And we've already seen some of that happening. And my friend Bill Preston, of course, knows more about that than anyone. But this is a telling chart from the IEA about what's going on in the real world in Europe because of their disastrous decisions on energy policy, including these claims that, we'll just run it all on wind and solar and we'll rely on Russian gas. Germany is now in recession, and it's going to stay in recession, and it's going to drag a lot of Europe down with it. Okay, I've given you the lecture on Exajoules, a quick lecture on physics. You need to know this stuff. Power density. What is power density? Power density is a measure of energy flow. It can be harnessed in a given area, volume, or mass. Energy and power are not the same things. Energy is the ability to do work. Power is the rate at which work gets done. We don't give a darn about energy. What we want is power. I'll put sawdust or ice cream cones in my gas tank or the fuel tank of my truck if I think it would give me or allow me to drive back to Austin this afternoon. I don't care about the energy that goes in the tank. What I care about is the power that I get when I press that accelerator, or the power that I need to heat my home. Heating power, motive power, amplification power, lighting power. That's what we care about. So back to power density. Power density, a measure of energy flow that can be harnessed in a given area, volume, or mass. This is an IEA chart that I just dressed up a little bit, showing the resource intensity of various forms of electricity generation based on the number of kilograms of metals and minerals needed per megawatt of capacity. Not my data, not my numbers, the numbers. International Energy Agency, but I doctored them to make them more legible. I added them up, I summed, that's all I did. Offshore wind, look at the molybdenum or the zinc intensity of offshore wind. Same with onshore wind. I think that's because of the steel that's involved. Not to mention, then you've also got silicon, rare earth elements. I'll come back to that. And then look at nat gas down on the bottom, which it's surprising. The nuclear numbers to me are a little high. They seem a little high to me, but I'm not the IEA. But nevertheless, what are they? Nuclear, you need a lot of chromium. All of them need copper, of course. But the metal and mineral intensity of natural gas, according to the IEA, not according to me, is very low. And in fact, it's about 1/13 of the metal and mineral intensity of offshore wind. And why does power density matter? And why am I so pro-nuclear? Why am I pro-natural gas? Power density. The power density of the nuclear plant at Indian Point, which was foolishly closed, criminally closed by that idiot Governor Andrew Cuomo, see you later, 2,000 watts per square meter. And they closed it because the NRDC, the Natural Resource Defense Council, said, well, we don't like it. Radiation. And now what happened in New York? Emissions went up, prices went up, 2,000 watts per square meter. In fact, shale gas now has power densities on par with nuclear power plants. Why? Because of well spacing. And it's not because the industry said, hey, let's reduce our footprint. They looked around and they said, if we put our wells closer together, we can go out this way and that way, we can have a smaller footprint, we make more money. Hell, let's do that. Rolls-Royce's new SMR, 10,000 watts per square meter. That might win the competition in Britain for the SMR competition they have underway. Wind, 1 watt per square meter. I don't care where you put it. Solar, 10 watts per square meter. Wind energy, 1 watt per square meter. Onshore, offshore, it's 1 watt per square meter, period. Corn ethanol is a loser, one of the big losers of all time. Uh-oh, what happened? China. This is particularly relevant since last Wednesday when the Biden administration, I almost said the Obama administration, funny that. Being funny here, and I'm not even trying. Again, like the grid, why would we make the grid weather dependent? Why is this administration so dead set on making our auto sector dependent on China? I can't for the life of me figure it out. I'm not a China basher. China's going to do what is good for China. This is an IEA screen grab from their report in 2021 on minerals. This is a very good report. Who dominates critical metals? It's China. It's a China story. Rare earth elements. It's all China. And yet by 2032, the ruling, now this mandate that just came out from the EPA, without a by-year leave from Congress, will mandate by 2032, more than half of the automobiles sold in America have to be electric. Remember, this is the same administrative state at work in California. The California Assembly didn't vote on the internal combustion engine ban. It was a mandate passed by the Air Resources Board. These mandates for these draconian policies, and that, I think it is draconian, I think that's the right word, isn't coming from elected officials, it's coming from the administrative state, which I think is incredibly dangerous. And now to make us dependent on China, again, I don't get it. Why in the name of Peter, Paul, and Mary are they so eager to do this? And I think the answer is simple. I think it's the pressure that they're getting from the NGOs. And who was quoted in the EPA press release, by the way? An official from the Environmental Defense Fund, which operates on a budget, I think, of $300 or $400 million a year, and Al Gore Jr. This is hardly a cross-section of middle America. Again, a screen grab from the International Energy Agency on the battery supply chain. Again, China is the story. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, cathode, anode, et cetera. And this is their words. IEA dominates the entire downstream EV supply chain. They also control critical magnets, neodymium iron boron magnets. Now, I was not very good in chemistry in high school, and that was the last level, but this is an incredibly important commodity. And China controls 90% of the global market. These neodymium iron boron magnets are used in EVs and in wind turbines. At least 75% of the neodymium iron boron magnets that come into the United States come from China. This is a graphic from the Department of Energy, another screen grab. Whether it's mining, separation, refining, or magnet manufacturing, it's a China story. The Department of Commerce issued a very good analysis on this in 2022 that laid it all out. And if you look it up, and I've linked to it in one of my pieces on Substack recently, robertbryce.substack.com, that it's not going to be half of the Department of Commerce report was redacted. Significant parts of it were. Like a third of this report was redacted because of the national security implications of America's reliance on Chinese magnets. But it's not just the magnets themselves. They control 90% of the market, but they control 100% of the market for dysprosium and terbium, which are the rare earth elements that are needed to dope the magnets so that they work at high temperature. So again, where is the strategery here? I'm not a China basher. We live in a world that is interdependent. But why now in particular is this administration so hell-bent on relying on China? It makes no sense whatsoever. And I think it's deeply dangerous. And unfortunately, it's going to create this mandate is creating a lot of uncertainty that's going to have to be sorted out in the courts because the lawsuits are coming if they haven't already been filed. The same with the greenhouse gas rule in the electric sector. Again, creating a lot of uncertainty about where utilities should invest their money. So where do I come down on this? Natural gas to nuclear, I've been saying the same thing for 15 years. I haven't changed my tune at all. Natural gas to nuclear. You have to have an acronym end to end. Why natural gas? It's super abundant, it's clean, it's globally super abundant. The resources are very widely spread geographically. Of course, the U.S. has an enormous advantage because our pipeline network is just so huge, and then gas-fired generation in the developing world is minuscule. For an example, India has 1.4 billion people, Canada has about 35 million. They generate about the same amount of electricity from gas. There's a lot of room for growth in gas-fired generation. Why nuclear? I don't have to explain this with all you engineers in the audience. You know, this is obvious. You can't reduce CO2 emissions at scale without a big dose of nuclear. And energy security, grid stability, all of these things. What are the big challenges? Of course, the NRC, the NGOs, political risk, and fuel, which I'll talk about now. In the 1980s, the U.S., in the late 70s, the U.S. dominated the world in uranium oxide production. Now we import almost all of it. And the key supplier is Russia, which supplies about 25% of all the enriched fuel needed for the U.S. nuclear sector. Russia is also going to be one of the sole suppliers of HALEU, high-assay, low-enriched uranium, which is the fuel that is going to be needed by a lot of the SMR companies that are coming up with new reactor designs. But let me close with just a couple of quick things, and I haven't shown these slides to anyone else, and you're among the first to see them. And it's about luxury beliefs, and it ties back to this idea of the energy transition. And this is a new concept. There's a book out by this guy named Rob Henderson. His new book is called Troubled, and it's gotten rave reviews. And his story was he grew up in foster care in California in an impoverished family, went into the military, went to college on the GI Bill. Went to Yale, in fact. And then he went on to get a PhD, and he wrote this book about his childhood called Troubled, which I guess in some ways is reminiscent a little bit of Hillbilly Elegy by, who's the senator from Ohio now, J.D. Vance. But Henderson coined this idea of luxury beliefs ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower classes. And so Rasmussen did a recent survey to look at how these luxury beliefs actually play out. And the red are the elite 1%. The blue is just ordinary folks, voters. And then Ivy League graduates are in gray. And look at where gas stoves, how many of them believe in banning each of the following? Gas stoves, 80% of Ivy Leaguers say ban them. Gas-powered cars, non-essential air travel, SUVs, private air conditioning. The disparity between these super elites and the ordinary folks is just staggeringly large. And yet, who is, Department of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, where did she go? Harvard. Where did Obama go? Harvard. Right? We have a ruling class that thinks they know what's better for us, but what they're promulgating is a lot of luxury beliefs about critically important modes of living, including gas-powered cars. I mean, it remains to be seen. I don't know who's going to win. I think the election in November is going to be messy. It's always messy, right? But this ban on the electric vehicle mandate could be a real problem for Biden, because so many people love their cars, right? They don't, political party, whatever, but I want my F-150 or my Silverado or my Ram. One more on this. So this is, do you favor or oppose strict rationing of gas, meat, and electricity? Look at the Ivy League graduates, 89%. The elites, 77%, and regular folks, like the linemen at Encore, I bet I know where they will belong on this pie chart. You're gonna say, take my hamburger, ration my electricity? Are you out of your mind? So I want to end, I'm trying to tie all these things together, maybe doing it badly, but I want you all to understand the battle that you're facing. And Commissioner Christian is right, it's a battle. And I got to tell you, you're losing. I say that with no relish, but look at this administration. Look at the power of the administrative state. Regardless of whether Trump wins in November, these people aren't going away. And I showed you the numbers in terms of how much money is at stake with the American Clean Power Association. Wait a minute, what happened here? So what do I see as your key issues coming from Austin to Tyler? Like, I know what I'm talking about. You all live in the oil patch. You understand what your challenges are. These are the ones that I see. The methane rules, I think it's Quad O, right, is the regulation. It's terrible for the independent producers, terrible. It's gonna kill the stripper well guys. And the super majors like, yeah, okay, no problem. And I'm coming here to East Texas and remembering, it's kind of like the early days of before pro-rationing, right? The super majors against the independents, right? Who's gonna win? The super majors, fine, more regulation, yeah, we're all in favor. Now, ultimately pro-rationing and the regulation for the oil industry was good for the independents. But this onslaught of regulation is gonna be very bad, particularly for the small independents, and the methane rules are gonna be part of that. Key question now is, what's gonna happen with the Chevron doctrine at the Supreme Court? My watchwords, my phrase is energy security is national security. And energy realism is energy humanism, and we need more of both. There's been this disconnect between the humanity of our civilization and the understanding of the essentiality of energy. I just did a short video that I put on TikTok just a few minutes ago about the East Texas field and how important it was to the war effort in World War II. 350 million barrels of oil was moved from East Texas to the East Coast after the Big Inch and Little Big Inch pipelines were built. This isn't ancient history, it's less than 100 years ago. And yet this connection between security and humanism in America has been lost in this massive rush for decarbonization. So let me conclude here with just a couple other quick things. This is my new docuseries. It's out, came out January 31st. We've already had 1.2 million views. It's a 5-part docuseries. I'm crazy proud of it. Spent about 3 years making it. We're highlighting the importance of the grid, why it's being undermined, and what we need to do to fix it. I've written 6 books. Here it is. I just dropped it. 6 of them. Here you are. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell all your coworkers, everyone you know. You don't have to read it. You just have to buy it. And if you buy it on your Kindle, I make a better royalty, so help me out. The paperback of A Question of Power just came out. You can buy that one, it's cheaper. I have been doing the Power Hungry podcast. I just put it on hiatus. This is probably should have not put, but I've done 224 episodes, had a great fun with it, but I'm going on vacation for a little while. I've been working almost as hard as Tom Trimble. I'm on Substack. My Substack is free. I write what I want, when I want, how I want, proud of what I do there. It gives me the freedom to do and write about what I want. I know some of you were taking pictures. If you want to email me, probably a mistake on my part because I'm going to get a ton of email, maybe a ton of email, robert@robertbryce.com. I'll send you the slide deck. Happy to share it with you for free. I want to help get the message out. What I do is my purpose and my passion. I don't play golf. I'm not going to retire. This is what I do. And I'm trying to help move the conversation forward. I hope our docuseries helps move the conversation forward because there is a sense in this country, and I feel this in my bones and what I see, a disconnect between the people who are building things, making things, and producing energy and this elite class. And they're completely disconnected from what you all do. And it's a dangerous point in this country because of that. And so anything I can do to help you, share my slides, that I'm happy to do it. But you have a lot of work to do, and your business is under threat. So don't take it lightly. What's my recommendation? Pack a lunch. Pack a lunch. Because this isn't going away. This regulatory onslaught, this bans on natural gas, these electrify everything pushes, the electric vehicle mandates are not going away. I wish you great success. Thank you kindly. I think I went over, but.
No, you're great.
Oh, okay. Are we talking, we have time for questions or am I done?
We're done. We're done. We're trying to get everybody back to their offices in time.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Roy Maynard. I'm a member of the Energy Committee. I'm also senior writer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, where I have the privilege of working with Courtney Bagley. Courtney is the education director at TPPF. As part of the team, she manages the curriculum development and teacher professional development efforts for TPPF. She works to ensure the best education policies are put into practice in Texas schools. She has a master's in secondary education and a master's in instructional technology. Prior to joining TPPF, she worked in a variety of public school settings in South Carolina and Texas. She's a seventh generation Texan, and she has 4 boys. So help me welcome Courtney Bagley.
So my job is to make sure that the students in Texas are aware of these issues in a way that is accessible. And I want to share with you some of the things that we've been working on. I was hired 2 years ago by Jason Isaac. Some of you may know him. Jason Isaac is the strongest advocate for oil and gas that I know. His love language is sparring with politicians in Congress. So if you ever have an opportunity to watch any of the hearings that he participates in, it really is an experience. Jason hired me 2 years ago to come up with a comprehensive way to take policy that we're working on related to energy and make it applicable to kids K through 12. So one of the big things we've been involved in, I look at the work that I do differently than other energy education. It's a very comprehensive approach. We're the upstream, midstream, and downstream of all of the policy as far as it relates to K-12 education. So I'm really excited about this. In most states in the country, the education standards for science are determined by the national science guidelines. And as I'm sure you can imagine, they lean one way. But in 2019, the State Board of Education in Texas took this on, and they made some really great changes to the standards. If we could just put those back up, yeah. So these are the highlights that I wanted you to see. The one I really appreciate is an emphasis on teaching kids in 6th grade about global energy poverty, and that relates to the energy density issue that was brought up earlier by Mr. Bryce. Also, in 8th grade, they do have to learn how natural and man-made events could lead to climate issues, and also they have to describe the carbon cycle. When you look at these seem pretty common sense, but you will not be surprised to know that we got a lot of really bad press on these education standards. The Scientific American took to task our State Board of Education members, not one article, but two. And you know, here in Tyler, you should know that your State Board of Education representative, Kevin Ellis, has been a very strong and faithful advocate to making sure that science education is robust. We are in the process of finalizing some science textbook approvals. That was a big mess back in November. But again, your State Board of Education members were very strong, and they held the publishers to account. And they said if the books don't match the standards, we're not going to have them in our state. So that was a very exciting thing to watch. I've also been serving as a subject matter expert in with different state agencies on how to get good science education into the classrooms, and I hope in the next year we have some really exciting things to share in that. So another project that I've worked on relates to how do we get information into the classroom. And so we've done a couple of things to this end, which are on the next slide. We developed a partnership with the Oklahoma Energy Resource Board, who has for the last 20 years been training and teaching teachers and also providing lesson plans to the classroom. They gave us these lesson plans totally free of charge. They did not care if they had their branding on it. They just want this information being given to kids across the country. So to that end, for the last year, we have been updating with teachers these lessons to make them match Texas standards. We have been platforming these on a Substack, but next month we are going to have a website, and the website is called Teaching Texas. And we're not only highlighting energy production in Texas, but we're also highlighting civics education, because we want our kids to be good voters and have a strong understanding of their government and the role that it plays in their daily lives. And we're also going to be profiling Texas history with some great videos and lesson plans. Just kids in Texas should be proud of where they come from. They live in the greatest place on earth, and we want to be able to offer them the teachers' materials to be able to share that with their students. And also we have some classroom resources. We've developed videos and posters. I love our poster series. You can't see it here, but we have 6 or 7 of these, and this one in the gray is called Chemistry Powered, and it takes all of the different forms of hydrocarbons, and it shows students the products that are in their daily lives. And then the blue one is called Hospitals Powered, and it shows students all of the medical resources that are also hydrocarbon based. We have Classroom Powered, we have Homes Powered. If it could be done, we've thought of it, and we have given these posters to teachers free of charge across the state. And when I hand these out, I'm sharing with students how great their lives are because of all of these wonderful products. I remind them that without them, they would be naked and afraid. So, and then on the next slide, this is something I'm really excited about. This was developed, Energy Day was developed with a group of moms in Midland called Ladies Powered. It's sort of our little think tank operation to come up with ideas and ways to get information out to the students. But they came up with this idea of Energy Day to have oil and gas professionals come into the classroom for just a couple of hours and go through 5 really simple hands-on lessons related to energy in general and then oil and gas in particular. And we have taken this to a whole new level. In October, we turned these into Energy Awareness Month activities, and we have reached really every area of the state with these activities. And we put them together. We give all the teachers all the resources that they need, and we mail them out in October. And then we are wrapping up a partnership also with Texas Tech, using these same 5 lesson plans to put together an energy box with their Sizer Institute, STEM Institute, and teachers who have access to the professional development with Texas Tech are going to be able to check out these materials and use them in the classroom to teach their students how amazing the energy is that's found underneath their feet. So that's a really exciting partnership that we've developed with them. We also have a Summer STEM Energy Institute where we spend 3 days in Midland with teachers from across Texas, and we get them on the rigs and we take them to the refinery in Big Spring, and we show them the story of oil from start to finish, and by the end of the 3 days, they're wanting to leave the classroom and work on a rig. They are blown away. It's such a wonderful opportunity for them and for the oil and gas workers that are involved, because they are able to ask all the questions that they've ever had about the industry to these professionals, and then these professionals are able to share with them their excitement and enthusiasm for the work that they do. So often they feel, like nobody understands or cares or wants the products that they make, but these teachers have really shown them just how grateful they are. So it's been a great partnership. And then finally, it's been talked about, there are shortages in these industries. And so another aspect of this that I've been really keen on is working to help come up with policy solutions for some of these workplace shortages. And one of the areas where we see a tremendous opportunity is through the parent empowerment that Governor Abbott has talked about so much across the state. There are CTE, career and technical education programs throughout the state that are federally mandated. There are energy programs. However, oil and gas is not a federal energy program that is funded from the Perkins Grant. You can have STEM energy and renewable energy programs, but not oil and gas. So several years ago, there was a state oil and gas career and technical education program that was implemented in the state. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of access for our students. And so in 2019, there were only 34 students across the entire state who were completing programs in oil and gas in high school. Compare that to 24,000 students who completed a certification in healthcare therapeutics, which is the equivalent of a CNA. That is mind-boggling why we are not helping kids to lift themselves out of generational poverty issues by providing them access to these oil and gas programs. And so one of the things that the parent empowerment legislation will allow is for high school kids to leave their high school during the day to go and attend at a community college a program of study to give them a certification in diesel mechanics or electronics or even oil and gas. And 90% of our students live within 30 minutes of a facility that would offer them this opportunity. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity for your industry to be able to have access to great students who have a good education coming out of high school in these areas. And we're looking forward to seeing what happens here in the next few months with that in the next legislative session. We're also looking for opportunities to get teachers and kids in front of oil and gas workers more than we've already done, just to give that human-to-human contact so that they see that this is not, the big bad climate change that Greta and others are talking about, but there really are people and families who care about the environment. And then finally, we are going to be platforming towards the end of this year a learning management system for teachers, oil and gas employees, and elected officials on a federal, state, and local level. I don't know if you know this, but not all elected officials are very keen on energy education. And so what we want to do is provide them with lessons on the grid, lessons about ESG, energy density, and things that they can use to make themselves and the people in their offices more well aware of the issues surrounding energy. And for the oil and gas employees, a lot of these lessons are really about the environmental protections and things that oil and gas are are already involved in, like the land reclamation, other things that oil and gas workers can have to be proud of, information that they can share with their friends and family. So that's just, I gotta go, but my time is up. But I could literally talk about this all day. We do have a Facebook and our Substack. I will say our Facebook is not, it's a work in progress because we have so many things going on. We really haven't had time to devote to it. But the Substack is the one, is that my left or right? I guess that's my left. Is that right? The one over here? The one without the words, I think, is the Substack. But we have the Substack, and we do post on that once, twice, 3 times a month. We have videos, professional development opportunities, updated lesson plans, and all kinds of things. So if you know a teacher who you think would benefit from any of these resources, we would love for you to share that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brent Jasper. I'm on the Energy Committee as well as the Energy Summit Committee. And wow, what a great group of speakers. We're almost done, you guys. Hang in there. So the speakers today have done a really great job reinforcing that a healthy and thriving energy business is vital to East Texas, the U.S., and the world. Our collective future relies on our ability to continue to provide abundant and affordable energy to fuel the world's continued growth. However, do you know what audience is not getting that message? It's the one that Courtney was just talking about. It's the kids in our schools. And so I think this is a great segue, and we can all agree that they're not receiving the complete and true story about not fossil fuels, but hydrocarbons. In 2019, the Tyler Chamber of Commerce Energy Summit and Energy Committee recognized this challenge, and they made a $5,000 gift to Discovery Science Place with the intention of kickstarting a campaign and an exhibit that would educate kids in a way that makes them know about all forms of energy, and that all forms of energy are vital to our future as a country and even our security. And so I want to invite Executive Director of Discovery Science Place, Carol Whiteside, up just to say a few words about this exciting project. And then I want to really ask you guys to help get behind that. And at the end here, there's kind of a little exhibit in the back that Discovery Science Place has. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Brent Jasper has gone above and beyond to help us get this project off the ground, and we're so grateful for him. It's really exciting to be here today with you guys and share our hard work with this wonderful and very relevant group of people. I have to say that I'm glad we didn't spend the original money from the Chamber Energy Committee back in 2019, because I wouldn't have been able to be a part of the project, and it's been so wonderful. But I am grateful to them for believing in us and for this support. This time of year at the Discovery Science Place, our parking lot is full of buses, full of kids excited to be there on field trips. We can see up to 200 kids a day coming from about a 60-mile radius. So we have a big reach, and we really value education, and we want kids to be excited about learning. When kids and families visit, we want 2 things to happen. 1 is that they have fun, and 2 is that they're engaged in hands-on activities that get them curious about the world around them. Over spring break, I was able to go into our camp and bring dry ice. And if y'all know, dry ice experiments can be a really bubbly, foggy, good time, and the kids really enjoyed it. And they had questions they wanted to know. What if we put it in the oven? What if we ate the dry ice? And so one of them said to me, how did I know how to do all of those experiments? And then my favorite was I was leaving, and a little boy said that he loved me. And I thought, oh, that's the best part of my job. But when I was getting my remarks ready for today, I thought about those campers, and I thought about something you'll see Les Campbell say in our video, that it's really up to us adults who are knowledgeable and passionate about things to pass that on to the next generation. And that's what we hope to do with our new exhibit, Powering the Future. But before we roll the video, I have to give a big shout out to Chase Doughton, our board chair. He saw the potential of what this could be for Discovery Science Place, and he really encouraged us to dream big, and we really have. This will be the biggest new exhibit since we opened 30 years ago, so we're really excited about that. Finally, I would like to thank, we have our own DSP Energy Committee, and we've met regularly for over a year now to make sure that the content is what we want, that the hands-on components are there, and that it fits in our budget. It hasn't been super easy, but we've Zoomed with Courtney Bagley, we've had a lot of input. We really want to bring the best that we can to our kids here in East Texas. So if you are serving on our Energy Committee, would you stand for just a sec or wave your hand? I would like to recognize y'all. There's quite a few in the room. Melissa, yay! So thanks to our committee, we are ready to move into fabrication, and that's what we're going to need your help and your support. So if you're interested in partnering with us, like Brent said, we have a table in the back, and we'd love to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Well, our mission is igniting curiosity in young minds through fun, hands-on exploration. So I love curiosity, I love the fun part, hands-on, we've got all of that where kids and adults can come here and really just maybe see something they've never seen or try something out that lets them go home and be pondering some of this that might lead to a STEM career or possibly a new invention or innovation. And I love to think that some of that starts here with our mission.
For me, it's a good place for me because I feel like I'm a kid at heart in a lot of ways. And just for me, what the Discovery Science Place has done for my family and for my children and how they react when they're here and how really the whole family reacts when we're here. I mean, the cool thing about the museum is there's something for everybody here. And it doesn't matter if you're young or if you're old, and it's a good place to hang out with your kids and to do doubles types games with them and be able to really both of you learn at the same time as having fun. And that really meant something to me.
Well, I don't think as humans there's any greater responsibility than to try and leave a better world for the next generation. So I know it's probably a tired old trope, but I believe that to be true. And what better way can we do that than to create an environment where kids can learn and spark the interesting about learning and science even before they even get to kindergarten in many cases.
Powering the Future is a new energy exhibit that is coming to Discovery Science Place. And it's important to me because the times that we're in. I believe that we're at such a critical junction in energy, and we've got lots of opportunity. We've got solar, we've got wind, but we also still have fossil fuels. And how do all those come together and how do they tie together? And for us, educating the future is what Discovery Science Place is about. So to me, we're in the heartland of energy, and Texas is so fortunate to have all the resources that we have. And we've got the prime platform to educate children. So I think that for me, it made sense, and that's why I'm really excited to bring this to East Texas.
I don't think I'm saying anything too controversial when I say that the point of view that's being delivered to our kids these days about the energy industry is probably on both ends of the spectrum. However, having been in the industry, I can tell you that it's not an either-or solution, renewables versus fossil fuels. As we move forward for the next 10, 20, and 50 years, the math simply doesn't work that one side or the other is going to be able to meet the growing energy demand of our world. And so we're presenting a balanced view that shows that in order to meet the demands of our future, it's going to require all forms of energy. And I'm glad to be able to teach kids about that so that they have an informed opinion as they enter into the school systems.
What excites me most is we want to stay engaging and relevant in our community. So we get to support teachers and educators through the hands-on activities here, reinforce concepts that they teach in the classroom. So if we can open up Powering the Future and have teachers bring their students here and get a different take on what they're learning in the classroom, I think that's amazing, as well as continuing to stay engaging and relevant. We want our guests, even though they've loved coming here for a long time, we want them to still wonder what might be new and what might be around the corner.
Powering the Future is our new exhibit, and I do believe that this is just the springboard for Discovery Science Place. We've got a lot going on. We've got a very solid strategic plan that we want to put into place. And for the future, I think this is a perfect opportunity, and like I said, catalyst just to get all of those other projects rolling and started. And it's a really exciting time for Discovery Science Place, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
All I can say is if you're in a position where you're able to help us in this endeavor, I would greatly appreciate it. As I've said before, I don't believe there's any more greater responsibility we have than to teach the next generation and leave the world in a better place than where we found it.
What a great video. Good job. One additional thing we wanted to do as the Energy Summit, as the Energy Summit Committee and the Energy Committee, alongside the Tyler Area Chamber of Commerce, is to kickstart this campaign. We wanted to give another $5,000 check to Discovery Science Place. We thought this would be a great way to kickstart their fundraising campaign, and I don't think they've received any checks yet, and I'm sure that this is going to be the biggest one that they received. But go for a little bit more if you can on the dollars, and you can just give us a small check. So, and I do have a small check for you too. So.
Oh my goodness! I feel like I won the lottery
Thanks, y'all.
today.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for the efforts that are going on over at the Discovery Science Place. And at this time, I'd like to thank once again our presenting sponsor, Lockton, for being our presenting sponsor, and all our other sponsors. I'd like to thank each one of you for being here and supporting this event. We hope to see you again next year at the 14th Annual Energy Summit, and we will now consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you very much.